going to commence with our presentations, and we have picked the order of Wallace Milam to go first. I think that he has visuals for us along with his presentation this morning. Wallace?
Yes, this presentation will be almost entirely audio-visual, and I hope that the lights and so forth are set for that. We will have many of the slides will involve script or text, and I certainly hope that they can be read. I don't know Gerald Posner. I had hoped that today would be a chance to meet him. Apparently that is not going to happen. I do want to say in the beginning that I have heard that Mr. Posner has been the object of some attacks, not legitimate kinds of attacks, but that he has been the object of attacks as to his personal life, harassing phone calls and this sort of thing. I think that I would certainly like to go on record as deploring that, hoping that that speaks for the smallest fraction of the research community, and that I hope that that had nothing at all to do with and I think it didn't, nothing at all to do with Mr. Posner's decision not to be here. I do not know Gerald Posner, but I know his work. I think Case Closed is a dishonest book. I think it is a book filled with errors. I think those errors are deliberate. I believe that the book was written with an agenda in mind. I believe that Mr. Posner's claim that he entered into this with an open mind to take him wherever the facts led him is a claim without merit. And I believe that evidence will be introduced here today and in this conference which would indicate that that was, in fact, not the case. Beyond that, I believe that many of the mistakes and the errors in the book are deliberate. They tend in one direction, which is suspicious. It is the selective use of the historical record and the abuse of that historical record that I plan to talk about. I plan to show you that Posner used material given and cited certain sources and certain pages, and ignored at the same time the contrary evidence found on the same or the adjoining pages, evidence which he had to have knowledge of, but which he did not use. Now, this book has received some of the most remarkable media attention that we have ever seen, 27 pages in U.S. News and World Report, and praise, appearances on TV talk shows. I actually thought that Dick Cavett was going to have an orgasm when during the Posner interview. The single bullet theory arouses strong feelings in people. I never quite expected that. The praise from some of the critical community has been, I think, unstinting and uncritical. This is Stephen Ambrose's comment. My favorite is this one. Posner looks hard at all the evidence his reporting meets the highest standards. Keep that in mind. We are told at U.S. News that he re-indexed all the 26 volumes plus the House Assassinations Committee's volumes plus all these 3x5 note cards. And my suspicion is that while he was re-indexing some of that, he should have read it, and that perhaps the note cards needed to be a little larger in some cases. I want to show you, and you can do this on any page you'd like. Let's turn to just a few aspects of Mr. Posner's treating with the subject and see how he handled it. Let's take, for example, getting the rifle into the school book depository. The long paper bag, which was supposed to be lying there but was never photographed there. Of course, only two people ever saw that bag, Wesley Frazier, Lenny Mae Randall. And it'd be interesting to see how Mr. Posner managed to get the rifle into the school book depository. Of course, Mr. Posner needs for this paper bag to be as long as possible to contain the rifle. And he faces the fact that in order to contain the unassembled rifle, we have to have a bag 3 feet long. And Miss Randall and Mr. Frazier both indicated that the bag was between 2 feet and 29 inches long. How does Mr. Posner handle this? And I like to look for the little things. Mr. Posner is a lawyer, and he presents a pretty good brief. And this is what I want to show you right here in this first example. As the package is put in the car, Mr. Posner says that Oswald laid it in the back seat and the package lay across the back seat. That kind of jumped out at me when I saw that. Because here's the testimony of Wesley Frazier. What part of the back seat was it in? It was in his side over in the far back. And how much of the back seat did it take up? I would say roughly around 2 feet. Now, where in the world did this nonsense about reaching across the back seat come from? Well, by golly, it came from one of those storehouses of nonsense in this case. It came from Dr. Latimer's book, Kennedy and Lincoln, where for some reason Dr. Latimer wrote down here that Frazier noticed that the package reached nearly all the way across the back seat. Didn't come from the testimony of Frazier, came from the testimony of Dr. Latimer. When they get to the school book depository, Posner writes that Oswald hurries into the school book depository early, leaving Mr. Frazier sitting in the car. Obviously, this is a sign of guilt. He doesn't want Mr. Frazier to know about what's in the package, etc., etc., etc. But we go to the record, and we find that Wesley Frazier told Joe Ball that he didn't get out of the car immediately. Thank you. That he was sitting there looking at his watch, and he had 7 or 8 minutes to go. What I was doing, he says, I glanced up. I was watching cars for a moment. I was letting my engine run, getting to charge my battery, because when you stop and start, you have to charge up your battery. So, did Mr. Oswald rush into the school book depository, or did Wesley Frazier stay behind and charge the battery of his car? It's little things like this that you know he found, but you know he doesn't use. Now, the size of the package. When Wesley Frazier was given a replica of the 3-foot bag which was allegedly found on the floor of the school book depository, and Wesley Frazier had said that Oswald carried this bag in his right hand, cupped in his right hand, and it fit under his armpit. Oswald was 5'9", Frazier was 6'1". So counsel asked Frazier to take the replica of the bag and put it under his armpit, and hold it in his right hand and put it under his armpit. But he couldn't put it under his armpit because it stuck up past his ear. Yet Oswald had carried this package tucked under his armpit. Now, how in the world is Posner going to deal with this? Well, it's pretty clever. He cuts the Gordian knot. Frazier saw he carried the package next to his body. And how else would one carry a package? And he transfers the armpit carrying to Mrs. Randall's testimony. This is how Posner reported what Mrs. Randall said, that he carried it under his armpit and it nearly touched the ground. Try that sometime. But that's okay, because Mrs. Randall didn't say that anyway. This is what Mrs. Randall said. He carried it in his right hand, had the top sort of folded down, had a grip like this, and it almost touched the ground. And he was grabbing it with his right hand at the top of the package, and the package almost touched the ground. So Mr. Posner finessed the Frazier and the Randall testimony, and he didn't finesse James Daugherty's. He just ignored it. James Daugherty told the Warren Commission that Oswald didn't have anything in his hand when he came into the building. Now, as you notice this testimony which Daugherty gave back in '64, see if you think Joe Ball would really like for him to have something in his hand. Do you recall him having anything in his hands? Did you pay enough attention to him, you think, so that you would remember whether he did or didn't? And he says, I can put it this way, I didn't see anything. In other words, your memory is definite on that, is it? In other words, you would say positively he had nothing in his hand. And having gotten Daugherty reluctantly to agree to this, but now, this is the bag that Oswald carried under his arm, tucked under his armpit, folded in the middle here. Now, what about at lunchtime? Posner needs Oswald to be on the 6th floor. There are several people who saw Oswald on the 1st floor. Posner presents the idea that he never came down at lunchtime. He talks about the crew that was laying floor and that they take the elevator down and they race each other, and then he writes this. Billy Lovelady, Jack Doherty, Danny Arcee, and Bonnie Ray Williams remembered Oswald remained upstairs when they took the elevator down. Yep, but they remembered something else too. That Oswald said that he wanted the elevator to come down too. I heard him holler to one of the boys to stop. He wanted the elevator. These are the very pages that Posner cites that Oswald remained upstairs. I believe Oswald was on the 5th or 6th floor. You all close the door on the elevator. I will be down, or something like that. It's not in Mr. Posner's book. On the way down, I heard Oswald say, guys, how about an elevator? But he said something about an elevator. Now, believe it or not, and I found this hard to believe, he relies on Charles Givens to get back to Oswald back on the 6th floor. He relies on the Warren Commission testimony of Charles Givens. He doesn't rely upon Charles Givens' FBI statement, in which here, as you can see in Commission Document 5, Givens apparently told the FBI on the day of the assassination he saw Oswald on the 1st floor. Not only that, but that FBI report creates an itinerary for Charles Givens, and this is often ignored. Not only did Givens not say that he went back to the 6th floor and saw Oswald when he talked to the FBI, he gave them an itinerary which prohibits his going back to the 6th floor. There was no time for him to have gone back to the 6th floor according to what the FBI recorded that he told them on November 22nd. None of this is in the book. Nor is this, the later discovered commission document from Jack Revell, which indicated that Givens would change his story for money. And a month and a half later, Givens changed his story. When he appeared before the Warren Commission, he remembered for the first time that Oswald had gone to the 6th, he'd gone back to the 6th floor and had confronted Lee Harvey Oswald there. That's the portion that Givens uses. The reporting meets the highest standards. Earlene Roberts, the car honking outside. You know the story, the police car while Oswald was inside. Posner says that didn't happen. Her account is false, relying upon a source, an unimpeachable source, Hugh Ainsworth. He says that Ainsworth interviewed Miss Roberts 4 times on the afternoon of the assassination and 3 times during the subsequent few months. And guess what? She didn't tell Ainsworth about the first 2 interviews about the police car. She told me specifically that nobody was out there when he ran out. Remember those last words, when Oswald ran out. Posner's a lawyer. But what Posner didn't see was the FBI report. Mrs. Roberts' first interview with the FBI 1 week after the assassination, she tells the FBI about the police car, about the whole honking incident. It's not something she contrived later to tell to the Warren Commission. It is something which she told the FBI from the first. And not only that, but when you look at her Warren Commission testimony, she never said that there was a car outside when Oswald ran outside. She said the car came and honked when he was in the house. Where was Oswald when this happened? He was in his room. It was after he had gone to his room. Yes. Rose Cheremy. Most of you know that story. I don't know if I believe the Rose Cheremy story or not, but I don't believe very much in how Mr. Posner handled it. He says that Rose Cheremy never told Dr. Weiss about this plan to kill Kennedy that she knew about until after the assassination was over. Notice his footnote, House Assassinations Committee, Volume 10, page 200. When one turns to Volume 10, page 200, one finds this. Dr. Rice recalled on Monday that he was asked by another physician, Dr. Bowers, to see a patient who had been committed before the assassination. Dr. Bowers told Weiss that the patient, Rose Cheremy, had stated before the assassination that President Kennedy was going to be killed. Dr. Weiss Rose Cheremy didn't tell Dr. Weiss about this until after the assassination because Dr. Weiss never talked to Rose Cheremy until after the assassination. Why did he talk to her? Because another doctor asked him to. Why did that doctor ask him to? Because she had told him about the plan before the assassination. So much for disposing of that one. Same page, next page over, Francis Fruguet, the policeman. The Louisiana policeman story is recounted. Rose Cheremy told of the plot. told him about it ahead of time. We have references here on these 2 pages to Francis Fruge, to Dr. Bowers, both of who were told about it ahead of time. Mr. Posner, these were obviously left off the 3x5 note card, and only the part about Dr. Weiss after the assassination was contained. William George Gaudet. This is probably Posner at his best. Gaudet, of course, had the misfortune of having the tourist card next to Oswald's in number. Posner admits that Gaudet provided information for the CIA, but he says that Oswald didn't travel with him, there were no other associates, and that the House Select Committee reviewed Gaudet's CIA file, determined he had no clandestine relationship with the agency. Notice the footnote, the citation. The report, page 219. I nearly fell over when I turned to page 219 to check this. This is actually what is on page 219, which Mr. Posner must have seen. Oh my goodness. There on page 219 is the fact that Gaudet told the House Assassinations Committee that he saw Oswald talking to Guy Bannister. But that didn't keep Mr. Posner from writing in his book that there's no credible evidence that Oswald ever knew Guy Bannister. And Gaudet was able to testify, notice this, that he had observed on occasion Oswald at the New Orleans Trade Mart. I've heard of that place. Now, failure analysis. It's a large part of the book. They, of course, helped in that mock trial, and you will notice in the book that there's a person named Robert Pizziali who worked for the prosecution on that, who is widely acknowledged. 6 footnote references to Pizziali, in fact. No one else at FAA is mentioned. Why is this? Why is there not any reference to contact with FAA? Because had Posner contacted FAA as an entity and asked for their input, he would have discovered that FAA, contrary to what you would gather from reading Case Closed, takes now and took no position on the JFK case. And according to that statement, they provided, of course, expert witnesses for both sides. Roger McCarthy, the CEO of Failure Analysis, in fact, appeared as a witness for the defense. And if you get a chance, you should read the transcript of this Bar Association trial, especially Mr. McCarthy's testimony. It's quite interesting. And oh yes, there is one other little thing that Mr. Posner didn't tell us about the FAA. With all the trajectories which are to prove to the American people beyond any doubt that the shots came from the school book depository 6th floor window and were fired by Lee Harvey Oswald, this book is to convince us of this, and the major thrust of failure analysis work is to convince us of this. One thing Mr. Posner didn't tell us, that when this was presented to the jury, they didn't convict Oswald. But the American people are supposed to be convinced by the same material, book form. Now, I would like to close with the Shaggy Dog story. Jean Hill, of course, was here. She watched the assassination. She has become an important and a publicized witness. And Mr. Posner goes after Jean Hill. Quoting Jean Hill from her deposition, to take a picture of President Jackie, and they were looking at a little dog between them. Hill elaborated later to say it was a white, fluffy dog. When she discovered there was no dog in the car, she claimed to be confused by the white roses, but they were actually red. She later dropped this dog from her story. The esteemed Dallas FBI worker Ferris Rookstool will be seen tonight on CBS ridiculing Miss Hill and her shaggy dog story as part of the CBS 2-hour special tonight. And so keep that in mind as I take you to Love Field in Dallas as the motorcade is about to begin and as Jackie Kennedy enters the car. Here, under the roses in her left hand, is the little stuffed dog. Actually, it's Lamb Chops. We believe it was given to her by a little girl as she walked along the fence. Love Field there. We'll have some video in just a moment showing that. Here's her hand. Here are the roses. We'll have some video in a moment showing the roses before and after the little white dog. And I thought that Gene Hill ought to at least be vindicated a little here. Okay. Go ahead, run the video now if you want. Actually, not only does you see it here, but she shows it to the president in the car. She holds it in her hand between them, and as he gets the video rolling here, I hope we can see that. And also, there is one clip which shows her shaking hands along the fence, and the little girl gives it to her, passes it to her as they shake hands along the fence. In literary terms, this is known as a pregnant silence. Okay, this will run several times, by the way. Here you'll see her in just a second. She will hold it up in her hand. Right, it shows much better right here, just a second, right here. And lays it in the seat. I was looking for something else when I found this a few weeks ago, and I don't know, we'll decide when there's enough video here of this. There's the little ears. It's lamb chop, we believe. There's one moment in which the president she shows it to the president, he looks down at it after shaking hands over here. Here's the sequence over here as she goes along the fence. I'm sorry that I don't have this very well. Robert Groden will have this for us soon, because some of this comes from video he used some time ago, but I didn't have the original to work from. But this is the moment here in which she is shaking hands. Here she is before and after with our little dog. Okay, thanks. That's fine. Thanks. Some of you will saw the Frontline thing the other night. By the way, how much time do I have, Jim?
About 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, on the Frontline thing the other night, you saw Mr. Posner do his Dan Rather. Did you about that Oswald attained the second highest rating for shooting in the Marines, that he was a sharpshooter, and that he was a marksman even when he left, forgetting to tell us, of course, that there were only 3 grades of shooters in the Marine, that all Marines are marksmen. And those are almost the precise same words that Dan Rather used, I guess it was in 1978, in a television special. I think Mr. Posner is politically correct at this time. I think there's been a concerted effort on this 30th anniversary to close this case. I think you cannot look at Frontline and the things that have been done, and the amount of space spent on this by U.S. News and others, that there's this concentrated effort. And I would like to say, of course, that it is clearly failing miserably. The CBS own polls show that belief in conspiracy in this case is the highest it's ever been. Not only that, but I really believe that the CBS and the Frontline documentaries do no good. I think that when people now see, when they see us down here, they see, that's the gathering of those people who believe in conspiracy. When they see a CBS documentary, I think most American people simply say, there's CBS at it again. And so I think that the documents and the release of the documents will overshadow everything that we see on TV this fall, and probably everything that's said at this conference too. Thank you.